the President's State of the Union message. The topic now as we call in our panel, and we are so pleased to have joining us, Skyping in from Madison, Wisconsin, Josh Orton, the senior advisor for Progressives United, and from Newsmax, New York, Liz Peek, columnist for FoxNews.com and the Fiscal Times. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you both for being here. Liz, we've talked a lot thus far this morning on the president's plan to raise taxes. Allegedly, it's going to be to raise taxes on the rich. Let's talk about the chances of a Republican-controlled Congress going along with any part of it. Liz, what do you rate those chances as being?
Slim to none or dead on arrival. These plans, these proposals have seen the light of day before, earlier in Obama's tenure, when he had more friends in Congress and a Democrat Senate. This isn't going to happen, and the president knows it. What he's trying to do is put individual tax reform ahead of business tax reform, which is something where there is bipartisan consensus, and basically undermine a sort of important program that the Republicans have lined out as something that they can get done. So it's politically pleasing to the president. It's not going to happen. And it's sort of more of the same old tax the rich strategy, which, you know, hasn't really flown before. It's not going to again.
So, Josh, help me understand. Right after the midterms, the president said he wanted to work with Congress. Doesn't that involve finding some topics where there is mutual agreement rather than doubling down on the campaign slogans of the past?
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is that Republicans, when previewing Obama's State of the Union tax plan here, almost always neglect to mention that this plan will include fairly significant middle-class tax cuts, which I believe is something that both Republicans and Democrats could agree on and talk about universally. But of course, Republicans only want to focus on the highest income tax brackets because those are the tax brackets that the contributors care most about. So obviously, we're going to ignore the middle class tax cuts. Look, I think
now wait a minute. It's not ignoring middle class tax cuts, but you got another problem, don't you, Josh? Aren't you raising taxes on the middle class with the fees associated with Obamacare?
Well, I think that there's a couple things. First, I think we're closing tax loopholes that have long stayed open. The second thing is we're looking at a capital gains rate for the very top rate that's just returning to the levels that they existed under President Reagan, who I'm sure Republicans can appreciate. Look, I'm not really willing to take Republicans' words for how this tax plan is going to affect the economy. They're wrong about the stimulus. They're wrong about how Obamacare was going to wreck the economy. And I think they're going to be wrong about this. So really, I think that this is a plan that, frankly, this is the Obama that I would have liked to see 2 years ago or 4 years ago or, frankly, even 6 years ago.
All right. Well, Liz, you've got a minute. Are Republicans wrong and this president right?
No, we can go back to the beginning when basically Obamacare threw the economy into a total state of uncertainty, ladling on a gigantic
you had
new
your
program.
turn, Josh. Let Liz make her point. Let her make her point. We got time.
We had a very fragile economy coming out of the financial crisis. Employers in particular were very concerned about the mandates from Obamacare. They didn't know what it meant to hire somebody. How much was it going to cost to add a new employee? Nothing could have been more detrimental to the very fragile recovery in 2009, 10, 11 than having this giant new regulatory apparatus involving 1/6 of the economy sprung on the American people. That level of uncertainty, you can see it in all the confidence indices for business managers, small business employers, et cetera. That has been a fact from the beginning.
Look, here's the situation, Josh. We know you're going into hyperventilation on this. Take a deep breath. We're going to come back. We'll pursue this. Don't worry, we're not going to ration care to you like Obamacare might. We're just going to step back, take a deep breath, and continue the discussion after this on America's Forum. Let's continue our lively political panel from Newsmax, New York, Liz Peek, and from Madison, Wisconsin, Josh Orton. Josh, you are hyperventilating there. You took issue with what Liz was saying about Obamacare. You now have the floor, sir.
Yeah, well, I was just stunned by the lack of facts. I guess what I heard Liz say that Obamacare was such a blow to the economy. As far as I'm concerned, and I'm fairly sure most economic indicators are in agreement about this. The economy is actually in a much better place since Obama took office. We've had a slow but steady recovery, and I think Obama's tax plan here is a way to sort of bring back some of the wage stagnation that's existed and to bring some opportunity back to America's middle class. All these sort of sky is falling predictions that we've heard from Republicans over the first 6 years have been wrong. And I guess I'm starting to wonder, does anyone ever have to pay a price for not being correct? And it seems the answer is no.
Well, sadly, the American people are paying a price, to judge from Liz Peek's reaction. Liz, your take on what Josh just had to say.
Well, slow is the operative word for the recovery. Yes, we have bounced back from one of the worst financial crises in our country's history.
I agree.
But every indicator would suggest that job creation has been woefully slow. And, don't take my word for it. Go talk to business people, something that unfortunately people on the left almost never do. Talked about small companies and how they're trying to hire people, but the costs of all these regulations, not just Obamacare, but other ones too, they're just drowning in red tape. Do you think they're just making that up? No, they're not. It's a serious impediment to people who want to hire people. This is not imaginary.
On top of that, Josh, you've got the labor participation rate at the lowest number since the mid-'70s.
Well, I think one of the problems with that is because no one's paying a wage that is enticing workers to take jobs. Look, I don't think we have. I don't think that American workers are lazy. I think that's fairly an insulting conventional wisdom coming from Republicans that that American workers somehow are just so comfortable being unemployed that they don't want to work. Look, I think that the minimum wage has to come up. I think that American workers have to actually see a reason to participate in the workforce. And I think that, frankly, I agree that wages have not followed pace with the recovery the way we'd like to have seen. But the notion that somehow it's because the government is holding back employers from just doing the right thing, to me, seems preposterous.
Well, let me shift gears.
Employers don't do the right thing, Josh. Employers act in their own best interest. They want to make profits. That is the mother's milk of economic growth. And when you talked earlier about how these tax changes are supposed to help middle class wages, that's not the truth. What's going to help? The government does not create wages. The government only takes money and redistributes it amongst various participants. That is really a killer idea for how to expand this economy. It always has been and it always will. And by the way, I don't have to tell you, every time we have cut the capital gains tax, the revenues generated from capital gains taxes go up. And every time we expand it or increase it, they go down. That's just a fact.
All right, Josh, go ahead.
The president is only suggesting that the top capital gains rate goes back to, I believe it's 28%, which is what it was under Ronald Reagan. So this is no sort of Chicken Little sky is falling situation.
Well, take a look internationally. All I can tell you, Josh, it seems to me that we ought to remember what Milton Friedman said. If you want less of something, tax it. And when you tax capital gains, the potential reinvestment, you're setting up a problem. 15 seconds to you, Liz, and then we'll give Josh the last word. Go ahead, Liz.
Look, I think what the president is doing here is pandering to the progressive wing of his party. I think that's very favorable for Liz Warren. I think it's really unfavorable for Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's going to have to defend the economic policies of her husband, which were definitely not progressive, her own ties to Wall Street, which, by the way, is also targeted in the president's address tonight. I just think this is sort of same old, and none of it's going to go anywhere.
Got to give Josh the last word. Josh, go ahead. 15 seconds.
Well, I'm always amazed by the right's obsession with Hillary Clinton, but I think the workers and the middle class of America are going to hear President Obama's plan tonight, and they're going to like it.
Fair enough. Josh Orton from the proud home of the Pail and Shovel Party, Madison, Wisconsin, and Liz checking in from Newsmax, New York. Thanks to you both.